I first really want to tell you that we're here to say thank you first and foremost. I speak for myself, I speak for Wendy, I speak for David, I speak for Ryan, I speak for all of us in saying thank you for all that you're doing, whether you are on the front lines right now with COVID-19, whether you're not seeing patients because you can't and because that's where, or you're seeing patients virtually, you're carrying the stress in incredible ways. And we're really grateful to all of you for what you do every day, always, and particularly now in this crazy time of uncertainty. Ken Moses was born into a post-Holocaust German-Jewish family. Both of his parents, who had been dating in Germany, he just told me actually, were German refugees who came to the United States. And he grew up observing and experiencing his family's struggle with death, disability, trauma, dislocation, and prejudice. He has, in the last more than 50 years, practiced psychotherapy and teaching in the areas of crisis, trauma, loss, and grief. He is known in his practice one-on-one and teaching settings and also different kind of work. He was just telling me before we started this call, he may be doing some consulting within our North Shore system as well, even though he is officially retired. Despite his retirement, he has very graciously come out at certain moments to be supportive of our NSCI community, and this is one of those. He is very pleased to try to be helpful this evening in this conversation, and should you all decide that you'd like to have future conversations, either in large group or smaller groups, he's open for that conversation as well. So thank you, Ken, for joining us this evening and for the time you put into preparing.
Thank you for the privilege of letting me be here and do this and get out with my doldrums in terms of feeling like I'm not doing anything when everything is going on. That's one of the problems about being retired. Feel like you're not doing anything, and I have all this stuff and all this need to do. So I feel privileged to be here because this is about supporting you. This is about giving you something in terms of you doing all the giving in whatever level you are, on whatever work you're doing. And as far as I'm concerned, we are all frontline workers, whether it's mental health or physical health or anything else that goes with it, or it's with our families, it doesn't matter. We all have that. And there are such tremendous stresses in places that we are that we've never been before.
Here's what I want to talk about in terms of this. The rug has been pulled out from everybody. Some of us are on the front lines, literally on the front lines, dealing with patients who are dying, dealing with patients who are seriously contagious, having to work with circumstances that are both frightening and whatever else, and having to probably do the most intense, superb work we know how to do and ever thought we would have to do in the most intense circumstances. The rest of us, and I'm going to include myself as the rest of us, not on the front lines, are personally affected in tons of ways and are caregivers of different types in different circumstances. And that has been taken away from us by this circumstance of all the isolation, all the, having to be with family or with ourselves and in ways for our own safety or for the safety of people around us. And that is beyond frustrating, way before the financial and the other kinds of issues in that. In that sense, we are all in the same boat. And everything that I know about grieving and about trauma and about crises and about loss and about death and dying, and everything that we do is being stirred up here, whether we are on the front lines seeing it and working with it, or whether we are just privy to all of what's going on and shocked by it. The key that I understand, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, the retired foot surgeon who is now a counselor. Somebody want to clue me in as to what his name is?
Gary.
Sorry about that. As you now know that you stepped into this counseling area and you're hearing all this stress and all this anxiety and that you're trying to deal with, the thing that is the most important thing in the world, also especially for the person who is the mortician doing the work here and the undertaking work, which is incredibly difficult at this time, I'm sure, all of us have one thing and one thing in common, which is we're dealing with our own stress and then having to deal with other people's stress and not knowing what to do, which I think is probably incredibly unfamiliar for most of us. For most of us, certainly who are trained in the healthcare professions, whether it's mental health care or physical health care or everything in between, it's something we are not accustomed to feeling. At least I have not been. I've had my concerns in different circumstances where I didn't exactly know what I was doing, and this is certainly one of the circumstances tonight, right now, in doing what I'm doing with you, that I don't know what I'm doing. This is just a totally new medium, a totally new way, bringing us together. And those of you who are on the front lines at this moment, you can't afford to, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, let yourself get in touch with the one thing that you need to get in touch with and share with other people, which are your feelings. And they're mostly the feelings that people consider dark feelings or negative feelings that are associated or stirred up when people are in the midst of crisis, trauma, loss, grieving, all of that type of thing. When I say dark feelings, I'm talking about, for instance, anxiety, which was talked about a lot, guilt, depression, anger, fear. That's what happens in all of these circumstances, is those particular feelings get stirred. And when those feelings are stirred in the midst of a crisis that has not yet shown any direction as to where this is going to leave all of us, emotionally, physically, financially, relationship-wise, in terms of losses and who's going to be lost and who's not, and everything that goes on, and being in very risky circumstances. Those are the very feelings that when things start to quiet down, we need to get in touch with and then talk with other people about. It seems like something small, but it's not. I mean, I heard, and again, I apologize for not having the names, and I don't have the advantage anymore to have all your screens with your names on it. But the people who have talked about losing all of your income, having to shut down your practice, not knowing where you're going to go and what you're going to do next, that type of terror and that type of discomfort and what that brings up are all the beginnings of some kind of a grieving process. I think we all know on some level, nothing is going to come back as it was. There is some possibility, but it's going to take a while, that the things that come back will be better. But the in-between is god-awful, scary, god-awful. And the one thing we need more than anything, as far as I'm concerned, is each other. And each other honestly, and each other in ways that enhance us, that do the very thing that Rabbi Green wanted to do and brought me in on, which is the function and the purpose of this. A confirmation of affirmation, information, and support. And I see myself as maybe leading a little bit with a bit of information. At least that's all I can do in this short period of time we have together here, is a bit of information. And absolutely affirmation and support. And then to go a next step and talk about how anybody can be doing this with each other And one of the things that I'm going to want to do, and just take a moment to do right now, is kind of go through the different phases of grieving very briefly, which is denial and anxiety, guilt, depression, anger, and fear. And for everything I know, all people, including even mental health practitioners, do what is culturally normative in terms of all these different kinds of, now I'm going to state this, healthy, normal, necessary, non-pathological, non-symptomatic feelings that are stirred and aroused in these particular circumstances. What they do culturally is the exact opposite of what we need to do with each other when we are in the midst of feeling these different feelings. And the quick examples I'll give you, and you can think the answer instead of speaking it, and I'll go through it with you, is what do you do with people who are denying? Well, inevitably, we try and get them to stop denying. We try and get them to face reality, particularly as practitioners of one type or another, because their denial can cost them and have all sorts of problems and whatever else goes with it. But denial is part of a normal, necessary, healthy facet of grieving, facet of dealing with crisis. No one is prepared for bad news. No one could prepare for all of the effects, and we haven't even figured out what all of the effects are from this particular COVID-19 situation that we're in. We have no idea what it's going to mean personally for each and every one of us ultimately. But what we first have to do is deny what it might do and hope that we will have the magic to keep ourselves protected from whatever the negative effects might be in any of the ways we've been talking about. Why? How is that natural and healthy and normal? Because denial buys the time needed to find the inner strength and the external supports to be able to deal with what's happened. This situation has happened in a split second, like all loss or all trauma happens. It's in a split second. There is not enough time for the psyche to take over and get a sense of it. So on one hand, we need to be accepting and understanding of denial, and on the other hand, we've got to pull people off the street who are standing in front of a truck that's barreling down on them. If they just stand there in denial, they'll be hit, and do what we can. So that's what I mean by we do the opposite of what really needs to be happening, which is to be able to accept, stand where somebody is. And so it is with anxiety. Anxiety looks like a symptom of some kind of neurotic symptom or something like that. And it's the kind of thing that we try and quiet down. We try and get people who are anxious to quiet down, to stop being anxious in essence. When anxiety has a function, anxiety mobilizes and then channels the energy that people need to come up with the solutions and deal with what's going on. So denial and anxiety are preparatory. The other four feeling states, which are the least comfortable or the really most uncomfortable, are depression, anger, guilt, and fear. And in their worst form, of course, they come out much, much more extremely, like hopelessness and rage and so forth. We have been culturally taught, and certainly for many of us as professionals, that we're not supposed to feel these kinds of things, and it's character weakness, or it's something that can really get in the way of our effectiveness as human beings, as functioning human beings, particularly in the roles that we have and the titles we have, when it's exactly the opposite. Each of those particular feeling states of grieving have a function. But what do we do with the depressed? We try and cheer them up and tell them everything is going to be okay. And or that's even more with the fearful. There's nothing to be afraid of. Or with the angry, that there's, to chill down, to chill out. And with the, which one did I miss this time? Guilt, depression, anger, fear. These four feeling states have to do with how a person believes the world works and their place in it. So we have to do the opposite. People have to talk about their guilt, even though it might be illogical, to be able to understand that they're struggling with the limits of their power and they're struggling with the issues of causality. What have I caused? What am I responsible for? And what is not within my realm? What is in more the spiritual realm that I think you can talk more about, Rabbi Green, and all that goes with that, rather than take it on ourselves. The grandiosity that we have comes and is burned by guilt oftentimes, if it's heard and responded to. The same is with anger. Anger has to do with a person's belief about what's fair and just in the world. And when that gets violated, that it's unfair, whatever is happening to them, that the reasonable, healthy reaction is anger, yet we're so afraid of it. Depression, we're scared to death about people committing suicide or going into depressed states as a pathology, that we do everything we can for medicating and everything else, when it's a normal, necessary reaction in terms of their sense of competency, capability, value, and worth is compromised when we have trauma, when we have losses. And lastly, the issue of fear or terror has to do with the fact that we are all vulnerable human beings, that we have not found the magic for immortality. We have not found the magic to keep ourselves safe, no matter how much or the people we really love. That is the truth. And something like this, that's so invisible and so frightening, and that you as practitioners in one way or another have to face, and face very directly and very fully, has to scare the hell out of you. Just has to. There's no other way. And yet, that fear has a function, because the function is that we need to come to terms with our vulnerability, to see the value of life, to see the value of every day, to see the value of who we are and who the people around us are that are meaningful, and take the risk to attach with people again, even though it's a highly risky thing, because all of us are vulnerable. That is the shortest version I think I have ever put this out in some fashion. I hope it wasn't too academic, and hope it was applied enough that, well, there is one piece that I want to add that makes it more applied. When we are confronted with people who are in denial or very anxious, or filled with guilt and shame, or filled with rage or depression or the fear, all of that, when we are talking with people, when we're engaging or being engaged that way, but now when we're engaging as the helper, as the family member, as the friend, what needs to happen, instead of trying to cheer up or calm down or correct, is to understand that those feelings have function. and are important, and that people need to be heard with the feeling. To be able to say something or convey something that basically says, now that I hear your story, now that I hear your situation, I can better understand why you're feeling these intense, frightening feelings. Is there more you would like to tell me about it? And listen with compassion, with interest, and with caring. It sounds like it's a small thing to do, particularly for those of you who literally save lives physically every day, psychologically, emotionally, perhaps even spiritually. This is the most life-saving thing I believe you can do.